Today, we delve into the enigma of Quentin Tarantino, a filmmaker who, like us, has traversed the boundaries of cinema, elevating it into something else, something audacious.
Tarantino, audacious? Indeed. He took the narrative, shook it furiously, wrapping it around a spindle of his own making. His beginnings with Reservoir Dogs launched 1,000 cinematic ships, each vying to capture a fragment of his daring.
While audacity marks his narrative, it is his flirtation with the voyeuristic qualities of violence that both compels and repels. Tarantino doesn't just show violence, he revels in its aesthetic, an uncomfortable mirror to society's own fascination.
Yet we must question, is this fascination with violence, this storytelling brilliance, merely a reflection of America's own grotesque thirst for it? Tarantino has become the laureate of cinematic bloodlust, but to what end?
The complexity in his films, layered with a precision that rivals a Kubrickian ethos, begs deeper scrutiny. Each frame, each cut is purposeful. Tarantino's methodical approach crafts narratives that are unapologetically his.
Beyond his visual or narrative technique, it's the raw emotion, the characters caught in limbo between humor and despair. This is where Tarantino connects. My own work sought to find humor in the human condition. Tarantino instead finds a tragic beauty in the grotesque.
Yes, his characters, flawed, vibrant, alive, are dragged through his narrative mazes, emerging scarred, if at all. In intertwining music with story, he gives these characters a soul, enriching the cinematic tapestry with sounds that transmute narrative into experience.
Experience, precisely what cinema is about. Tarantino has transformed the way stories are told, demanding more from his audience than passive consumption. To engage with his work is to challenge one's own perceptions of storytelling, violence, and beauty.
Yet, let us not blindly celebrate. A critical eye must be cast upon the psychological underbelly of his narratives. The glorification of violence raises questions about its impact on the psyche of an already desensitized audience.
And so we embark on this discussion, not as mere observers of Tarantino's craft, but as creators who recognize in his work a kindred spirit of rebellion, a disruptor of norms. But we must also question, critique, and analyze the implications of his influence on cinema and culture.
Our exploration will be rigorous and likely contentious. Tarantino's work is a mirror and a maelstrom, reflecting both society and the individual psyche. Let us step into this maelstrom, eyes wide open, ready to dissect and understand.
To dissect indeed. Our journey into Tarantino's cinematic universe begins now, threading through the narrative innovations, the brazen use of violence, the iconic soundtracks, and the complex portrayal of characters and themes. This is not just a discussion, it's an excavation of one of cinema's most provocative minds. We dive into the evolution of Tarantino's narrative structure, from the raw, blood-stained streets of Reservoir Dogs to the nostalgic lanes of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. How has Tarantino's storytelling evolved?
Reservoir Dogs exploded like a hand grenade in the midst of independent cinema. It was defiant, refusing the conventional storytelling. Now, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood sprawls, a love letter to a bygone era. His evolution? It's in his boldness to expand, to reminisce rather than just shock. But remember, growth does not always signify depth. It's the precision for me.
Early Tarantino gutted the narrative norm. Yes, Reservoir Dogs was a punch. But by the time we reach Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, there's a maturity, layers that we peel back like in a Kubrick film. It's not just evolution, it's almost a reinvention of self. Yet one might argue the essence, the DNA remains. Has he truly evolved, or has he merely dressed his narratives in finer clothes?
Ambition. Yes, we see it traced from his first to his latest. Each film, a chapter, expands his universe. His early work gripped us with dialogue. Pulp Fiction danced with narratives intersecting in a maddeningly beautiful ballet. Now, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood reflects, almost mournfully, on an era, on lives through the looking glass. Evolution, it's visionary. He throws the conventional plot structure out the window and lets his characters, his dialogue, dictate the journey.
Visionary Orson, or indulgent, each sequence a self-praise. His narrative structures are complex, but complexity alone doesn't deepen the narrative.
And yet, his indulgence, as you call it, Jean-Luc, challenges viewers, engages them in a dialogue with the film. Isn't that the mark of true innovation? The script doesn't just move the story, it becomes the story.
Agreed, Stanley. Tarantino enchants with narrative, something I aimed for in Citizen Kane. Storytelling that doesn't just unfold but reveals, layers upon layers, until the audience is left pondering long after the credits roll.
Complexity, evolution, indulgence. His path from Reservoir Dogs to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood showcases not just a maturation, but an audacity to explore, to rewind time while still pushing forward the narrative frontier. Isn't that the heart of cinema?
We're missing the point of technique serving the narrative. Tarantino's evolution is in how effectively he uses narrative shifts to not just tell a story, but evoke a response. It's psychological, a manipulation of audience expectations, much like my use of suspense. Yet, amidst this evolution and complexity, the human element, the soul of his characters, remain constant. Perhaps that's where true evolution lies, not just in how the story is told, but in how deeply we're asked to care, to invest. It's a silent film. The visuals, the dialogue, they sing because we see ourselves in the shadows.
So, we circle back to evolution as a blend of ambition, technique, and crucially, the ability to maintain the human core amidst changing narratives. Tarantino's journey from blood-spattered heists to nostalgic Hollywood reflects not just a change in narrative approach, but a deepening of the cinematic conversation. Violence in cinema, particularly as Tarantino employs it, is our subject. Alfred, what psychological dimensions do you find in his use of violence?
It's quite fascinating, really. Tarantino's violence is not gratuitous, but serves a narrative purpose. Take Psycho, for example. The shower scene isn't just about violence, it's about the shock, the invasion of privacy. Tarantino understands this intrusion, this shake-up of the psyche. His violence induces tension, making the audience feel a part of the narrative.
But is it truly serving the narrative, or is it the narrative serving violence? There's ambition in Tarantino's work, I won't deny it. But there's a fine line between using violence to tell a story and storytelling taking a backseat to violence. My works, like Citizen Kane, used innovation to tell complex stories. The question is, does Tarantino innovate or simply shock?
Gentlemen, I've always believed in the power of laughter over fear, in the triumph of the human spirit. We can communicate profound truths without resorting to violence. My films used comedy to explore the human condition, to connect and heal. Does the aestheticization of violence in Tarantino's films detract from their ability to truly touch the audience?
It's not about detracting, it's complexity and layers we're talking about. In A Clockwork Orange, violence was a tool among many to explore deeper themes of control, freedom, and the nature of evil. Tarantino, while stylish, does risk glorifying violence to the point where we risk becoming desensitized. His craft is undeniable, but the conversation should be about the impact, about what lingers in the psyche long after the film ends.
Desensitization, Stanley, indeed is a risk, and yet is not all art a reflection, sometimes a dark one, of our society? Tarantino mirrors the violence we see in the world back at us. It's uncomfortable because it's familiar.
Let's not circle around the core. What we're confronting is the commodification of violence. Tarantino, however brilliant, packages violence in a way that's palatable, even enjoyable. My films, while confrontational, aim to challenge the viewer, to incite reflection, not to commodify despair. There's a critical difference.
And yet, Jean-Luc, is there not also an artistry in Tarantino's violence? A certain poetic savagery? Something that speaks to the baser part of our nature, perhaps?
But we venture into the territory where violence becomes an aesthetic, almost beautiful in its execution. Is there not a danger there in finding beauty in what should repulse us?
Indeed, Federico. There is beauty in humanity, and even in its flaws, but when we start to find the ugly parts beautiful, we risk losing sight of what truly matters. Yet, we cannot ignore the visceral reaction it provokes. It is, after all, these reactions, these emotions, that make cinema so powerful.
Power does not excuse responsibility. In wielding violence, filmmakers must be aware of the shadows they cast, of the ideas they perpetuate.
Precisely, Stanley. The onus is on us creators to push the envelope not towards the acceptance of violence, but towards its understanding and its ultimate condemnation.
A contentious topic, indeed. Violence as a narrative tool divides opinions, creating a battlefield of its own within cinema. Tarantino's work, while polarizing, undeniably sparks debate, reflecting our society's complex relationship with violence. Let us navigate further into the essence of Tarantino's cinematic world. Let's dive into the symphony of Tarantino's films, the music. Quentin doesn't just use music, he resurrects it, gives it a new life within his narrative canvas. It's flamboyant, yes, but also character-defining.
Music in Tarantino's repertoire does more than shape scenes. It's theatrical, creating moments that outlive the scenes themselves. Think of the dance sequence in Pulp Fiction. Without the music, it's just two people dancing. With it, it's iconic.
The potency of music, indeed. In my days, we relied on music to provide the emotional backdrop in silent films. Tarantino, however, uses it to inject a certain irreverence and depth to his scenes, a masterful continuation of tradition.
Exactly, Charlie. But Orson, don't you think that sometimes it falls into the realm of the overly theatrical?
Not at all. Art is theater. Life is theater. Why should cinema shy away from its essence? It's about vision, Federico. Tarantino has that in spades.
Speaking of vision, sometimes I wonder if the music is not a character in its own right within his films. A character, yes, but also a psychological tool. He twists the knife with these tracks, making the violence more palpable, more unsettling.
That's where I might throw a wrench into this harmony. Is it not somewhat manipulative? Crafting scenes so the music isn't just a layer, but a directive on how to feel.
Cinema is manipulation, Stanley. Whether through music, shot composition, or dialogue. Tarantino's overt in his usage. You call it manipulation, I call it mastery.
Mastery or not, we cannot ignore the dialogue Tarantino's choices initiate with past cinematic epochs. He does not merely use music, he recontextualizes it, creating a pastiche that speaks to the savvy viewer.
Indeed, it's the recontextualization that adds layers to the viewing experience. It's not just the scene you're watching, but also the heritage the music brings with it. Yet let's not drift into unabashed adoration. The question remains, does this serve the story or Tarantino's penchant for nostalgia?
Alfred, it serves both, and that's the beauty of it. Tarantino's films are as much an exploration of narrative as they are a love letter to cinema itself. The music underscores this beautifully.
And so, we reach a crescendo in our discussion. Tarantino's use of music, bold, innovative, yet firmly rooted in the very essence of cinematic storytelling. It ignites debate, yes, but above all, it exemplifies the singular vision of a filmmaker, unafraid to blend the past with his narrative present. Quentin's portrayal of women gentlemen, a dive into the deep end. Is he empowering them or reducing them to mere objects?
He throws them into the chaos, yes, but emerges with characters full of life, empowered in their own narratives. Think Shosanna in *Inglourious Bastards*, a blend of tragedy and vengeance, orchestrating cinema's ultimate revenge.
Empowerment, really? These characters, they're draped in violence, almost reveling in it. It's less about them being empowered and more about Tarantino's spectacle of vengeance.
Violence, yes, but isn't cinema itself an exploration of our darkest fantasies? Tarantino merely exposes the thread, weaving it into characters both male and female. It's the psychological intrigue that captivates the audience, not the mere act of violence. But there's a fine line, isn't there? Must we always drape women in tragedy and violence to make them interesting? There's a whole universe of emotion and complexity disregarded.
But consider the extravagance of his characters. Like Fellini's women, Tarantino's are not mere caricatures. They are complex. They live beyond the screen.
Complexity does not justify exploitation, Federico. His work often blurs the line between homage and voyeurism, especially with women.
The question of exploitation is pertinent. His films mirror society's own obsessions with violence and sex, reflected through his female characters. It's a commentary, perhaps unintended, on the audience's own voyeuristic tendencies.
Commentary or not, it takes more than just replicating societal norms to create art. True innovation involves subversion, not just reflection.
And yet, isn't the greatest subversion to force contemplation? To make the audience face their own discomfort, to peel back layers, not of the character, but of themselves. Discomfort, reflection, subversion, all valid, but where's the line? When does portrayal become exploitation? Artistry should not come at the cost of perpetuating stereotypes or diminishing the complexity of women to mere narrative devices.
Precisely. The artist holds the power and thus the responsibility. Tarantino, with his undeniable influence, must challenge, not reinforce orthodoxies.
A weighty discussion, indeed, each viewpoint as valid as it is contrasting. Tarantino's canvas is as controversial as it is colorful, a mosaic of the absurd and the profound. The gravitational pull of Tarantino's Homage, or should we say, the thin line between paying tribute and veering into creative plagiarism, it's a topic ripe for debate. Stanley, your thoughts start this tempest, yes?
Indeed. Tarantino, while undeniably talented, treads dangerously close to the line of plagiarism. His borrowing from paced cinematic styles and narratives isn't homage, it's appropriation without innovation. The Killing influenced Reservoir Dogs so heavily, yet where's the acknowledgement? Art should transform, not transcribe.
But Stanley, you're missing the essential rebellion in his method. Tarantino dismantles cinematic norms and reassembles them into a dialogue with the past. This isn't theft, it's radical recycling. Everything is worth nothing. But in cinema, Tarantino proves that even disposable culture can become monumental in the right hands.
Let's not forget the importance of laughter in this discussion. My films, while silent, spoke volumes through the visual gag, a homage in their own right to the comedies of the past. Tarantino, too, uses homage as a form of wit, a nod and a wink to those in the know. It's not plagiarism, it's a celebration of cinema's history.
Astonishingly, I find myself siding with Jean-Luc. To innovate, one must first imitate. Did not Shakespeare himself borrow liberally from existing tales, yet who dares call his work plagiarism? Tarantino, like a skillful chef, blends familiar ingredients to create a dish uniquely his own. The essence of creativity lies in synthesis, not originality.
But synthesis must have boundaries, Orson. Without them, we risk diluting the very essence of creativity into mere mimicry. Tarantino's approach, while entertaining, sometimes lacks the subtlety of true artistry. The difference between inspiration and imitation is the same as between suspense and surprise. I fear Tarantino often confuses the two.
Alfred, you wield your subtlety like a shield, but cinema is about impact, emotion, and occasionally the sheer joy of recognition. Tarantino's dialogues with past masters are acts of love, not theft.
And yet, love must be respectful. To elevate oneself on the shoulders of giants is one thing. To claim their view as your own without acknowledgement is another.
Gentlemen, shall we agree that Tarantino's work, while controversial, forces us to re-evaluate our definitions of homage and plagiarism? Perhaps, in his audacity, he teaches us something vital about the nature of art itself.
So we dance around the fire of homage and creativity, each flame a story borrowed, each ember an original thought. Tarantino's cinema, a pyre of past and present, asks us not what is new, but what can be reborn. Let us then celebrate, critique, but never ignore the conversation he sustains within the pantheon of film. Let's delve into the pulsating heart of Tarantino's cinematic universe, his dialogue, a labyrinthine marvel that guides us through torrents and labyrinths of human psyche and ethos.
Tarantino's gift, if you will, strikes a chord similar to Shakespeare's repartee. There's a rhythm, almost musical. The hateful words spoken with such delightful wit, this could be a description of his work or of mine.
Precision in dialogue, the meticulous crafting is paramount, much like the Kubrick frame. Yet with Quentin, there's a proclivity towards verbosity that sometimes overshadows the essence of cinema. Show, don't tell.
But Stanley, cinema is also about dramaturgy, no? Tarantino revives the lost art of dialogue. He makes words perform acrobatics. It's not mere chatter, it's intellectual jazz, reminiscent of the New Wave's embrace of existential musings amid the mundane.
Dialogue, yes, it drives the plot, embroiders the characters. But with Tarantino, there's a danger. The words begin to eat up the silence, the precious pauses where the audience breathes in the scene. In silent films, we had to make every gesture, every expression count. Silence spoke. Silence indeed speaks volumes, Charlie. But let's not discount the psychological depth Tarantino's dialogue mines. Suspense isn't always about the unspoken. Sometimes it's about what is said, how it's said, the crescendo of conversation leading to the inevitable climax.
And yet, he risks turning dialogue into a gaudy sideshow, overshadowing narrative with the flamboyance of words. There's inventive, and then there's indulgent.
Indulgence? Perhaps. But isn't cinema the very realm for excess, for exploring the extremes? His characters live in their speech. They reveal, they conceal. They wield words like weapons. This is the essence of drama, of conflict.
I concede, Jean-Luc, that words can be weapons. But is every skirmish necessary? A film bloated with dialogue risks losing its sculptural quality, the purity of visual storytelling.
Let's not mistake quantity for quality. The meat of the matter is Tarantino's balance, or often imbalance. Yes, his characters speak volumes, yet sometimes I yearn for the unspoken anguish, the silent yearning that speaks louder than a torrent of words.
Profound insights all. Tarantino, in his orchestration of dialogue, invites us to a banquet of words. Sometimes it's a feast, at other times a surfeit, but always it's a reflection of life's own chaotic dance of words and silences.
Precisely, Federico. His dialogue invites us into a dance, a duel where words cut sharper than swords. The challenge is to not get lost in the verbiage, but to find the poetry and brutality coexisting within.
And in that chaos, in that dance, he crafts a narrative tension that keeps us transfixed. Whether it's a fascination or a critique, Tarantino's dialogue undeniably captivates.
As all things cinema, it's the captivation that counts. Whether through silence or soliloquy, we're seduced. Tarantino just chooses his seduction through a barrage of words.
The critique remains, however. The discipline of storytelling must govern the use of dialogue, not the other way around.
In the grand tapestry of cinema, Tarantino's dialogue-heavy approach is but one thread, vibrant and controversial. It ignites debates, such as ours, proving its indelible impact on the art form. Let's dissect Tarantino's audacious narrative gambit, his flirtations and commitments to non-linear storytelling, a spectacle or a maze. Stanley, you've orchestrated your own complex narratives. Does Tarantino refine or merely confuse with his approach?
Tarantino, while no doubt skilled in his craft, sometimes leans too heavily on disarray as a form of complexity. Pulp Fiction is celebrated, but its nonlinearity isn't always in service of depth. My endeavors in 2001: A Space Odyssey were to challenge, yes, but also to enlighten. There's a fine line where complexity becomes mere convolution.
Oh, please, Stanley. When have you ever shied away from convolution? Tarantino's method, much like my own work, isn't about confusion. It's about presenting reality's fractured nature. Life isn't linear. It's a collection of moments, a rosebud unfurling in the mind incomprehensibly. Tarantino captures that with finesse.
Exactly, Orson. Tarantino's nonlinear storytelling isn't a gimmick. It's a reflection of life's discontinuity. He's like a DJ remixing cinema's history, tearing apart the storyline's comfortable progression to shock us into engagement. It's the essence of narrative innovation, similar to what I tried in Breathless.
Shock, perhaps, but let's not confuse the purposeful manipulation of time with mere trickery. In Psycho, I didn't just shuffle scenes for the sake of surprise. There was a psychological intention, grounding every cut and jump. Quentin's work, while entertaining, sometimes feels like obfuscation dressed as art. Gentlemen, let's not overlook the emotional impact. Linear or not, storytelling is about the human connection. In my films, be they silent or talkies, the sequence of events always aim to convey emotion first. Tarantino, with all his temporal jumping, never loses sight of his characters' journeys. The heart remains central, chaotic timeline or not.
But is it always effective, Charlie? Or do we find ourselves so tangled in trying to piece together the sequence that we're distracted from the emotional core?
Distraction, Stanley? Or are we invited to engage more deeply, to lean in and truly listen to the dialogue, to observe the characters evolve in a way that mirrors our own unpredictable lives?
Intriguing points all around, highlighting the dynamism and divisiveness of Tarantino's storytelling. A disruptor, certainly, but one whose techniques invite us to question, to ponder the very nature of narrative. True to his cinematic lineage, or a rebel without a cause, the debate, much like Tarantino's films, continues to unfold. Quentin Tarantino, a maestro of the independent cinema scene, reshaped what we thought was possible outside the studio system. His audacity, nostalgia, yet innovative approach dared many to follow suit.
Indeed, Federico, Tarantino's resilience in the face of adversity mirrors the silent film era's creativity against its own technological limitations. His work, much like the tramp's journey, speaks to the underdog, to the boldness in all of us.
However, let's not adorn him with laurels just yet. Breaking boundaries is one thing, but the question remains, did he actually redefine independent cinema, or merely push the envelope of what's palatable to the mainstream?
Ah, Orson, always the provocateur. But in this case, I think you're nipping at the truth. Tarantino's films, packed with political fervor and experimental zeal, remind me of the Nouvelle Vague's spirit. They didn't just push boundaries, they obliterated them.
Obliterated might be a stretch. While I admire Tarantino's technical prowess and narrative innovations, the real test of boundary breaking is sustainability. Has he genuinely inspired a new generation to think differently, or has he simply fascinated them with a pastiche of the past?
Let's not be utterly cynical, Stanley. The man crafts his narratives with a psychological acuity that's hard to dismiss. His depiction of race, his dialogue's sharpness, these elements don't merely entertain, they provoke thought, discussion. Agreed, Alfred. His films, much like mine, offer a mirror to society, albeit through a more fractured and blood-splattered lens. But it's the reflection that counts, compelling us to confront our own darkness, our prejudices.
And yet, Stanley and Orson hover around an uncomfortable truth. Innovation for the sake of innovation can become its own cliché. Tarantino's homage to cinema's golden age is commendable, but to truly inspire, one must look forward, not backward.
Forward indeed. Tarantino borrows from the past to speak to the present. But real inspiration requires one to envision a future not constrained by the boundaries of yesterday's cinema. The true measure will be in the filmmakers who rise in his wake.
Precisely, gentlemen. While some may debate the longevity of Tarantino's influence, it's undeniable that his unique flair and defiant stance against conventional storytelling have ignited conversations. Whether he's regarded as a pioneer or provocateur, his legacy in independent filmmaking and in challenging our perceptions of film itself is indelible. Now let's delve into the provocative territory of Tarantino's handling of race and socio-political commentary. It's a landscape ripe for debate. Alfred, you've often enveloped your suspense with layers of psychological depth. How do you interpret Tarantino's narrative exploration of race?
Tarantino confronts us with violence and racial tensions, pushing boundaries uncomfortably close to voyeurism. He forces the audience into a role, not merely as spectators, but as implicit participants. It's a ploy I've employed in different contexts, peeling back the layers of societal facades to reveal unsettling truths.
Unlike Alfred's more subliminal approach, Tarantino screams his commentary from the rooftops. It's brash, it's loud, and it's unapologetic. He uses race as a vehicle for social critique, but one must ask, is it insightful, or is it merely shock for shock's sake? Godard would have dissected societal norms without resorting to such spectacle.
Ah, Jean-Luc, but there's genius in using the spectacle. Tarantino borrows from the playbook of Wellesian theater. Employ the grandiose to comment on the human condition. His unvarnished portrayal of racial dynamics, like in Django Unchained, is not merely shock. It's a mirror to America's grotesque history. It stirs the pot, surely, but is stirring not necessary to blend the ingredients of understanding?
Stirring, yes, but there's a fine line between agitation and exploitative entertainment. Tarantino dances on this line, blurring it. However, the complexity of these issues deserves more than just surface-level provocation. It demands a Kubrickian precision and introspection, something I fear gets lost in Tarantino's stylistic bravado.
Gentlemen, with all due respect, you're missing the point. The roles race and politics play in Tarantino's work offer a reflection, albeit exaggerated, of society. His dialogue invigorates the dormant thoughts of the viewer, much like the silent expressions in my films once evoked deep empathy without uttering a single word. It's about sparking conversation, is it not?
Certainly, Charlie, sparking conversation indeed. Yet, as we venture through these zealously charged terrains in Tarantino's world, we observe a filmmaker unafraid to confront and perhaps unnerve. This audacity, whether one sees it as crude or courageous, undeniably stirs a reflection on our societal constructs and personal prejudices.
So it seems we circle back to the essence of cinema as envisioned by the likes of us, to provoke, to reflect, to unsettle. Tarantino, in his brazen manner, fosters discourse as we have today. This is the essence of art, irrespective of the palette or the brush.
Provocation for provocation's sake, however, risks diluting the very message it seeks to amplify. While Tarantino commands attention, I yearn for the day when subtlety and nuance reclaim their throne in discourse.
Regardless, it's clear that Tarantino has carved his mark, however controversial, prompting us to confront uncomfortable realities. The effectiveness of such methods, though, is in the eye of the beholder.
And so we find that Tarantino's cinema, much like ours, serves as a canvas for broader discussions on race, on politics, on the human condition. Whether through a whisper or a shout, the conversation continues. Let's not shun the provocateur, but embrace the conversation sparked. Let's delve into the question that's on all of our minds. Will Tarantino's style persist or evolve in the upcoming generations of filmmakers? Quentin has painted cinema with bold strokes, but where do we see his influence heading?
Ah, Quentin, a man who dared to dream in the panorama of celluloid. His style, an ensemble of the past yet so distinctly his own. Persist, of course. Evolve, inevitably, like cinema itself. Our art is an ever-turning wheel, not a static monument. Look at Citizen Kane. Its influence persists and evolves simultaneously.
I believe Tarantino's love for storytelling, his unique dialogue, and character dynamism is timeless. These elements transcend generational changes. Just as my tramp character remains universal, Quentin's narrative genius will persist. His techniques may evolve, but their essence will remain a guiding light. Persistence implies a lasting effect, and Tarantino's influence is undeniably etched into the bedrock of filmmaking. However, evolution is a tricky business. Techniques evolve, but style? That's a more intricate ballet. Hitchcock's suspense is studied, imitated, but the essence remains uniquely Hitchcock. The same will be said of Tarantino. Study, imitate, but never duplicate.
Evolution? Cinema is always in flux, a relentless push against its own boundaries. Tarantino understands this. He borrows, reshapes, and reconstructs with a reverence and irreverence in equal measure. Filmmakers will continue to dissect his work, seeking that vibrant Tarantino essence. Yet, as Godard himself said, it's not where you take things from, it's where you take them to. That's the heart of evolution.
What we're overlooking is the inevitable dilution of influence over time. Yes, Tarantino reshaped cinema, but to say his style will evolve into future generations presupposes that it will retain its purity. Influences become echoes, echoes become whispers. Kubrick's work is dissected for its meticulous nature, and yet how many can claim to replicate its impact? Influence, yes. Persistence, undoubtedly. But evolution? That's an imprecise term for what actually happens.
A fascinating array of perspectives, each shining a light on Tarantino's undeniable mark on cinema. His work, like a river, may change its course, but always flows towards the sea. As he has drawn from the past, so will future filmmakers draw from him, transforming his legacy in ways we can only imagine. This is the beauty of our art, is it not? The eternal cycle of influence and reinvention. Quentin Tarantino, a name that certainly caused more uproar and spilled more ink than many in the past few decades of cinema. We've dissected, debated, and even detested at moments. What then is the indelible mark he leaves on cinema, assuming it is indelible? Let's hear it in raw, unvarnished truth. Orson, you start.
Tarantino, with his audacious narrative leaps and his unapologetic homage to everything from pulp to noir, does more than leave a mark. He drills into the very bedrock of genre cinema. Yet, what we must ask is whether this drilling uncovers new wells of creativity or merely muddies the waters. My films sought to redefine the language of cinema, whereas Tarantino often seems more interested in celebrating its dialects.
But there you perhaps underestimate the radicalness of celebration. Tarantino does not just mimic, he subverts. Like my jump cuts, his pastiches force the viewer to confront the form. He challenges our passive consumption of cinema. Yet the question looms, does this challenge engender a genuine evolution in narrative cinema, or merely a sophisticated form of pastiche?
Let's not meander into the abstract. Tarantino's legacy, while undeniably impactful, suffers from the very glut of violence and irreverence he popularizes. There is a fine line between innovating and indulging, and I fear he too often crosses into the latter. My endeavors have always been about pushing the boundaries of what cinema can achieve intellectually, emotionally, philosophically. Tarantino, gifted as he is, sometimes seems more preoccupied with pushing the envelope for the sake of shock and awe.
I must interject on a note of dissent. There's a tangible humanity in Tarantino's work, a visceral connection to the misfits and the outcasts that echoes my own little tramp. While our methods and our mediums could not be more different, the intention to spotlight society's underbelly, to give voice to the voiceless through comedy or tragedy, aligns us. His legacy, like mine, will be defined by its empathy as much as its audacity. Empathy, Mr. Chaplin? Perhaps. Yet, as we delve into the psychological dimensions of Tarantino's characters, there's an inescapable voyeurism that mirrors my own interest in the darker facets of humanity. The difference, alas, is in the subtlety, or lack thereof. Tarantino's blunt force trauma of emotional and physical violence renders the psychological impact superficial at times. My monsters lurk in shadows, his parade in daylight.
Then it seems we agree that Tarantino has forever altered the landscape of cinema, for better or worse, engaging with it on levels both profound and problematic. His is a cinema of excess, of unabashed homage, of dialogue that dances even as it damages. We may spar over the depth versus the dazzle, but let us not forget the ferocity of feeling he evokes amongst audiences and auteurs alike. This conversation, as heated and as varied as our views may be, underscores the complexity of Tarantino's impact. I thank you, gentlemen, for a discussion as spirited and as nuanced as the films of the man in question.